Hello, my name is Nicole Hunter. I'm a Durham College student taking the Educational Support Diploma program. Today I would like to discuss a topic that can be controversial for educators. Should cell phones be allowed in schools? I chose this topic because, as mentioned before, I'm hoping to work in the education field as an educational assistant. As an educational assistant, I need to consider a variety of perspectives other than just my own. I need to consider the implications of my decisions, how these decisions impact my students and other staff. I am also a parent to two kids. My daughter is 11 and my son is 7 years old. My kids do not own phones, however, that day is coming quickly. So, this question about cell phones at schools is of interest to me as a parent. What is in their best interest? I want to discuss some of the strengths and weaknesses in the writing of my research essay. Right off the bat, I discovered that there was much more research to be found supporting a ban of cell phones from school. There seems to be a bias towards opting for the easier path. Naturally, I'm going to find more evidence to support a theory of banning cell phones because, as an educator, it would be much easier to make a blanket statement that no cell phones are allowed rather than taking a more time consuming path of allowing cell phones and then having to work through a hard process of how to make that successful. To do this, educators would need to possibly change their methods and their beliefs of what a classroom looks like in today's society, and change is a very difficult concept for many individuals to accept. Myself, I have my own bias going into my research where I'm personally not ready for my child to have a cell phone. As well, my children's schools have families of a variety of income levels, and I've often been thankful that my children don't seem pressured to have technology that they need to keep up with their peers. I also have a vested interest in an inclusive classroom and equal opportunity for all. Another weakness I found in researching was the consideration of measurable data versus non measurable data. Many of the concepts in my essay involves areas that were hard to measure, such as mental health or levels of distraction. So a lot of my research showed me data that established correlation but not necessarily causation. So when writing my essay, if I can't concretely say cell phones cause these events, the mere possibility needs to be enough to sell my reader of this point. However, this also made my essay easier to write because since these concepts were interconnected and sometimes interdependent, allowed my essay to flow together. If I can make my audience believe one of these ideas, then they're hooked. I can also draw on fear of the unknown. With technology changing so rapidly, we don't have a complete understanding at this point of time the repercussions these technologies have on our lives or our health. And with this comes fear. So I'm able to use this fear to successfully make my points believable. This is where I can draw upon a strength in my essay. I have the law on my side. Educational legislature, such as the Our Kids Safe at School Act and Accepting School Act and the Provincial Code of Conduct, they all provide the legal framework to ensure that Ontario schools provide a safe and positive school environment. Legislature will always hold a huge weight in convincing an audience of an idea and will often trump people's emotional feelings. Now let's look at some of the key points I discovered in my research. My first key point, cell phones in schools increase opportunity for cyberbullying, creating a hazardous learning environment. I found that cell phone owners were more likely to report being a victim of cyberbullying as well as being a cyberbully themselves. They were more likely to be on the internet and text more often. Bullies have a problem with impulse control. So, if the phone is there, it's harder to resist and harder to not make those impulsive responses. My second key point is that cell phones negatively impact the learning environment through distraction. The presence of your phone actually reduces cognitive ability. This was interesting to me how we often have our phones turned off or set aside, but that this in fact influences our cognitive ability negatively. Maybe they feel like you're going to miss an important text or update. We don't really consider that we are physiologically altered by our phones. Another surprising finding was the attitude of students regarding acceptable cell phone use. A survey of Canadian high school students resulted in 55.7% of respondents saying that they felt it was acceptable to send or read text during lessons. This is evidence to me that students are not clear as to what is acceptable. They live in a world where there is day to day interruption by beeps and texts, and this is normal. So boundaries are clearly blurred for today's students. Furthermore, my research showed that other schools who did put a cell phone ban in place showed improvement in student performance. So, my last key point is that cell phones are detrimental to student health and well being. I found that there is a possibility of radiation exposure, and even Health Canada suggested limiting usage of cell phones for children. Cell phones inhibit children's ability to empathize with others. The way that we interact with less face to face communication might be influencing our ability to emotionally be aware and limits our ability to connect emotionally with others. Which leads me to my last point in my research that I found that there was a link between cell phone usage and depression, suicide, and stress. So, in summary, I found that cell phones do not provide safety for our children at school. Rather, cell phones put our children at risk for being victims of cyberbullying and becoming the bully themselves. Our children are distracted through cell phones and their learning environments are being negatively impacted. Lastly, cell phones put our children at risk for many mental and physical health risks, including depression and anxiety. In order to complete the legal requirements of schools to provide a safe and positive school environment, cell phones should be acknowledged as detrimental to the school environment and cell phones should be banned from schools. This research essay taught me to consider a variety of perspectives while understanding that we all have responsibilities at many different levels that need equal consideration. Similarly, successful workplace communication must ensure that all organizational objectives are achieved. We need to consider all these responsibilities when we communicate at work. If cell phones may be influencing our ability to empathize with others and physiologically changing us, what else does our communication choices affect? I will definitely consider more heavily the possible emotional and perceptual barriers that exist within a workplace that could impede communication.